Yeah, what a mic drop. That Flash trailer completely amplified my level of hype for the film to like a million. I was already moderately excited because I love the Flash as a character. I love the Flashpoint storyline. But then Ezra Miller's reign of terror happened, and yeah, they're kind of a piece of shit, and the continued reports of grooming, breaking and entering, robbery, various forms of abuse really soured me on the film as a whole. Honestly, the only thing giving me hope and allowing me to still get on board with the project was Andy Muschietti. I believed in him, having been a big fan of his work on the It movies and Mama. Also, he's just a genuine guy who thrives on creative collaboration. I'd heard nothing but exceptional things from undisclosed sources and people who saw test screenings. The praise was simply unanimous, and I can see why WB and DC didn't give up on this movie despite, well, everything. And it really does kill me to be so excited given Ezra's fucking bullshit, but god damn, I'm so excited for this movie. And look, hundreds of artists gave it their all to bring this incredible story to life. Filmmaking is a collaborative art, and it doesn't rest on the shoulders of one individual. There's VFX artists, editors, gaffers, set dressers, costume designers, screenwriters, the director, and other actors such as newcomer Sasha Cale, who dedicated years of their lives to this project and weren't a menace to society. What a concept!
A public menace!
It's complicated. I understand that, and I genuinely don't begrudge anyone for being against the film given Ezra's involvement, but more than them, this feels like the true creative product of Andy Muschietti and the artists he employed to come together and create something special. Separating the art from the artist, it's not easy, but in this case, I feel I can. It's a personal decision though, so you gotta make up your own mind. But what is irrefutable is the amazing kinetic energy held within this trailer. Though still unfinished, the VFX mostly look great. They don't look like mud. They're vibrant, colorful, takes place in daylight, dynamic, punchy anime-style action that makes you viscerally feel the speed and impact of the movements. Like, I know this was Zack Snyder's approach to the action, but I think it is so cool that the subsequent filmmakers have followed in his footsteps. It truly is a Zack Snyder is the blueprint moment, and it shows a reverence and respect for what he did to usher in a new era for DC. It's a shame some of, the most ardent Snyderverse fans aren't convinced anything he didn't directly direct doesn't count, but maybe this will offer them some solace. It seems like Andy really vibes with what Zack was doing. Same with James Wan, Patty Jenkins, and they wanted to try to carry the torch the best they could. Despite the mess and studio interference, WB had something good going with the DCEU, I feel. It wasn't the most cohesive or consistent thing in the world, but everyone gave it the old college try, and this seems like the perfect final note for that universe. A great way to thematically conclude everything they've been working towards for so many years, and there may be no better way to conclude all of this than in this Flash movie, which feels like an all-encompassing version of everything that has happened to the DCEU. I mean, this movie has been in production hell for so long, and it was announced in 2015, if you can believe that. Literally, Ezra Miller and the whole Flash movie was announced the same year that the Flash TV show started, and that show is now wrapping up. Just insane to me that it's taken this long to get a proper Flash movie. But finally, it's actually happening, and man, it looks spectacular. To give a bit of context for the story of Flashpoint, I think it's important to talk about the wider comics industry at the time it came out. You see, DC Comics, as it sadly has always tended to do, was down in sales. They wanted to try something new, something that would shake up the status quo and potentially boost the sales of not just a few of their books, but all of them. Generally, in comics, there are bigger books called event stories. They're basically for an entire comic universe what an Avengers movie is for the MCU. DCEU, a huge team up where they have to fight a big bad guy who has the potential to end the entire universe, if not the multiverse. Now, as to where Marvel Comics prides itself on having one continuous canon that has not been stopped or been interrupted since the release of Fantastic Four issue 1 all the way back in 1961, DC has taken a different approach. In the mid-80s, they did what is widely considered the first big comic event story in Crisis on Infinite Earths. The story was pitched as a way to simplify the canon of the DC universe and give a new jumping-on point for a lot of new readers. It would keep some parts of their histories, but writers and artists were also being allowed full reign to reinterpret these characters how they saw fit, to an extent. It also greatly decreased the confusion in multiversal stories and many other different Earths in comics that either did or didn't connect. It simplified it all, and after about 35 years, DC wanted to do this again because, well, the same problem had kind of occurred. Tangentially, Jeff Johns was writing for the Flash comic and was pitching a story called Flashpoint. His initial pitch was not too far off from what was going to end up being written, but what followed is where a huge change happened. Johns pitched the story as a quick 6-issue miniseries that would see Barry go back in time to save his mom and all the chaotic energy that would ensue afterwards. But Johns also said that after everything was said and done, Barry would return to the DC universe that had been running for the last 35 years. At this point, DC editorial asked Johns if there was a way to change this, basically into the next Crisis book. So instead of Barry returning to the DC universe that had been ongoing for some time, he would create a new one. Now, as I said, this didn't just come out of nowhere. DC had been wanting to do this for some time and just saw this as a golden opportunity to do so. And Johns agreed. He made it so that at the end of the Flashpoint story, a new universe would be created, kicking off DC's line called the New 52. Now, the history of the New 52 is an entirely different story and not film related, but there is something wildly interesting about how this story parallels what is happening in the DC film universe. The Flash movie is the DC film's way of getting their own New 52. Having made a bit of a mess with the Snyderverse, this gives them a get out of jail free card in the most energetic and exciting way possible. So it stands to reason that the Flash movie will follow a similar storyline and outcome because of what we know to be happening in the coming years for DC. So I think a round of applause is honestly in order because we have never given DC credit for so seamlessly following the confusing trajectory of their comics in the film space to the point where they're using the same solution as they did back in 2011. It's kind of incredible. But let's talk about this goddamn trailer. I genuinely can't get over the Man of Steel angle here with this. It's fucking genius. Now, last I heard, Henry Cavill was still going to have a final appearance in the film. However, I'm not too sure that's the case anymore given the reshoots and such. He should at least have a small role given how he was the one who started it all and should be there to send it off. But what we do have confirmed is Michael Shannon returning as General Zod, aka a gift to mankind, the king of DCEU villains. It also opens up so many questions about what is happening in this alternate timeline. I honestly think that the Zod stuff is so fascinating. Does this mean that in another timeline, Supergirl is fighting Zod instead of Clark? Because I'm inclined to believe that's the case. With Supergirl, it's interesting because she's the exact opposite of Clark, remembers Krypton and has a cultural connection to it. Maybe she's grappling with the fact that she's not alone anymore and like wanting Zod to be someone he's not, and then learning about Clark Kent from the original DCEU timeline allows her to understand what heritage she is able to bring into the future, a real choice to be made about how to be Supergirl. So her versus Zod is a totally different conflict than Clark versus Zod. Within this universe, what were her opinions on how Krypton was ruled? Did she approve of someone like Zod? Maybe she's fighting him on how Krypton should be revealed to the world. This is also something that I think can be played into with a disdain towards Earth. In all likelihood, I don't imagine this version of Supergirl was drifting away on the planet Argos with her father having to watch Kryptonian society die. I think, as she has done in many different interpretations, she is going to have a pod that allows her to get to Earth. Maybe she's even tasked with with protecting Clark, as they could be the last of their species. But as opposed to the classic Superman story, they don't crash in Kansas and get taken care of by the always lovely Jonathan and Martha Kent. In the Flashpoint comics, Superman is taken by the government and held there for his entire life until the Flash and Batman go to break him out, which definitely seems like what they do for Supergirl in this movie. But she might feel like she's failed in many ways. Maybe she wasn't able to save a baby Kal-El from being killed by the government in experiments, or he was sent off into a black hole in space that made him never reach Earth. And that's just really going with the idea that Kal-El will be in this movie and have some connection to Supergirl, but really they could just take Superman's arc from the Flashpoint comic and switch Superman with Supergirl. Now, because of all this, what would that do for her perception on Kryptonian culture persisting, and particularly how she views Zod? Is she more sympathetic to Zod's goal of giving Krypton a new life on Earth? She probably has a more jaded outlook on humanity given her imprisonment, and Bruce and Flash convince her to save these people because they all aren't bad. They all aren't trying to experiment on you and keep you hostage your whole life, though there are certainly those people in the world. She's essentially what the people of Earth, and specifically the government officials, think Clark is in Batman v Superman, so I imagine they play with that idea a bit. Obviously, I'm just spitballing here, but there's so much up in the air for it, and it's all so exciting to think about the potential. Speaking of the almost unlimited potential, I think it's time we talk about something we're all anxiously awaiting. Blue and gray Batfleck, baby. We did it. We got the blue Batsuit for the first time in live action since Adam West, and it looks awesome. I mean, you know, it's blue and gray. That's all that matters. And I guess we can kind of see now why Batman wears trunks, because we got a Bat package there, and that's all I'm going to say about that. That's the big Batman news. On to the next section. Alright, just kidding. Obviously, there is more to touch on regarding Batman. We have both Michael Keaton coming back for one more hurrah, and I could actually cry because it looks like we get proper Batfleck for one last ride. I honestly wasn't expecting to get much from him, let alone much from him in this trailer, and we still might not get a lot from him in the finished movie. And I've basically heard the same, so temper expectations. But oh my god, at least he's in the action bits. Having the two Batmen in the film, in a general sense, it's everything I hate about the current state of comic book movies and the cameoification of blockbusters. It's stupid, no way home fan service, but the difference here is the story, I feel, totally permits it. They constructed a story that necessitates the inclusion of the two Batmen, specifically thematically, and then let the fan servicey moments play out naturally. And at least the "I'm Batman" line actually makes sense in context. I mean, it has dual meaning because it's an iconic Batman line, but like, the dude's also introducing himself to the two Barrys, and it's done with an interesting, dynamic camera movement. It's not shot like a sitcom entrance, and there's such an interesting dynamic in teaming up Barry with an older Bruce. In the original comic, the big twist for Batman in the Flashpoint universe was that under the cowl was Thomas Wayne, not Bruce. That's fun in the comics, but it wouldn't be as special to the audience as seeing Keaton again, and honestly, it might not mean enough to these versions of the characters. Batfleck and Barry share a pain the other Leaguers don't, other than Cyborg, but you know, he's not coming back, as much as it pains me to say. But even on that Cyborg point, Bruce didn't find Victor, that was Diana. So Bruce being the one to find Barry and sort of take him under his wing makes that bond make sense. And you're able to contrast Barry and Ben's relationship with Barry and Keaton, so he gets something unique from being with a different Batman in this other universe. And it'll be interesting to see how they tie Ben's Bruce into all of this, because he's clearly still hanging on to some issues, I guess, per Batman v Superman. It gives us a chance to wrap up his arc for Batfleck. In the end of the comic, Thomas writes a note to his son that Barry delivers to his Batman. It's a very touching moment of a father being able to communicate with his son to touch on how much he truly loved him. And here, we can maybe do something similar with Michael Keaton. Yeah, he's not Thomas Wayne, but he seems to be a Batman who has really come to terms with what has happened in his life. It could be a way to allow Affleck to finally fully mourn, to look over the choices that have brought him to this point in his life. A perfect end to this beautifully broken Batman. And maybe it's done through allowing him to move on from this life. Maybe for Ben Affleck's Batman, letting go of the Batman mantle is his way of moving forward. Or maybe this is the way Ben passes the torch to our new Batman. I mean, how fucking cool would that be, right? I mean, it won't happen. I just don't logistically see that being possible given how far out Brave and the Bold is, and I don't think casting a new Batman before the film comes out and filming a scene with him is possible at all. But that being said, it would be an incredible passing of the torch moment. Ben to the new guy, or Michael Keaton to Ben to the new guy. I have no idea. Though if I'm being honest, it is more likely that Ben is there when Barry gets back and we get the message from an older Batman who's been able to figure out the balance and find a way to move past his parents' death and imparting that wisdom on a younger Bruce who's really struggling with what he should do now and the choices he's made in his life and how his parents have always been in the back of his head driving his crusade. That feels like such a poignant way to send off Ben Affleck's Batman and give him a final massive emotional moment that he deserves. And so I think this is exactly what he needs to be able to go out on a high note. Barry gets back and it's just a finite point on the DCEU, and I honestly think there won't be a dry eye in the audience when we're watching the final moments of this universe. The final frames can make it all feel like it all happened in a flash. Because, you know, that's the movie. And some people have said that Flashpoint shouldn't be the first Flash movie, that it's a big event that needs to be built to, but I gotta be honest, I don't agree. It's actually a pretty great first story for the Flash because it centers around what drives him, the death of his mother and the wrongful conviction of his father, and explores the limitations of his powers. I feel like the first thing people wonder about Flash are A, how fast can he go, and B, why doesn't he just go so fast he travels through time and solve every problem? This story shows why he can't just do all of that, and because his origin is kind of simple, you just want to get to the meat of the character. Plus, Zack Snyder's Justice League did a great job of introducing him so we can just take the baton and run from there. And this is a really poetic way to look at both the character study of Barry Allen and the DC movies as a whole. You make your own future and you can forge your own path forward, but to do so, you must also accept your past. A masterful note to leave the DCEU on as we build towards the new DCU. Again, that is so poetic. I love it. The idea that we can't change the mess that happened with the DCEU, though as hard as we may wish we could, shit happened and almost buried the DC brand, but there's a way to move forward. We may not like that we can't have the universe the way it was planned or intended, but we can make peace with it and build towards a brighter future with the DCU, which honestly feels like such a beautiful cap to this weird period for DC. Like even more so than Zack Snyder's Justice League, dare I say, which felt like a perfect conclusion to Henry Cavill's arc as Superman, kind of putting a bow on that through line in Zack Snyder's Justice League while also making peace with the DCEU in a meta sense. And it will all probably build from that one scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League where Barry was so close to affecting the past. I think it'll be him learning he was ultimately wrong in the Zack Snyder's Justice League scene, even if he needed to break that rule that one time in order to stop Steppenwolf. The reality is, you can't just make your own past. There are limits to trying to change what is already done, and you could probably argue that by stopping Steppenwolf, they invited an even greater threat in Darkseid to come invade planet Earth. Now, obviously, it had to be done, but there are repercussions to Barry tempering with the space-time continuum, and I think this film is really going to explore that. But back to the idea of changing the past. Look, we obviously know you can't do that no matter how hard you want to. The real key is what you do next. In the Speed Force scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's thinking in diamond absolutes, something that seems black and white, but has a lot more going on to it, which makes Ben Affleck's Batman a perfect mentor figure here, seeing as though that's kind of his outlook in Batman v Superman. And honestly, then going into Michael Keaton's Batman, who was less rigid to try and help Barry realize this. But the thing is, there are two Barrys. In the comic, Barry creates a new timeline that basically erased everything that had come before it, but in this, we are diving more so into the currently popular comic book movie trend of the multiverse. And it seems like a multiverse superhero movie that actually is interested in using that idea to its fullest potential. I don't want to be this guy, but like, what an absolute fucking tonic to Marvel and the MCU. And like, look, I liked Endgame, No Way Home for the most part, and I've grown a bit fonder on Multiverse of Madness. But like, come on. This movie right out of the gate seems to actually want to play around with its toys a bit. With Flash, it's clear even from the first trailer that story came first. Then the Easter egg fan shit, which is exactly what Gunn is trying to usher in with the new DCEU. But the situation of the two Barrys is very interesting to me, and it could just be that this is in the multiverse and it's another Barry, but there's something interesting about him. I get the feeling that he's not who he says he is. He's dressed in all yellow. Yellow. Guys, the Reverse Flash.
It was me, Barry. I jerked you off at super speed so it'd seem like you nutted at just a woman's tut.
They're practically screaming it to us. Also, in the comics, Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, starts out as the Flash's #1 fan from the future who literally gets plastic surgery so he can look more like Barry. And that's got a lot of like horror kind of elements ingrained in it, just that premise alone. And so I think a filmmaker like Andy Muschietti will be able to infuse some weird body horror and just tension in there, and I don't know, maybe take a page out of his work on the It movies or Mama or whatever. That just feels like a space that Muschietti is going to thrive in, and so I really hope something along those lines happens. And to give any sort of legitimacy to this crazy idea, who killed Barry's mother in this world? Because if Zod is the baddie, which he's not, but if he is, how is this film going to address that plot thread? At the beginning of the trailer, Keaton asks Barry why he's fighting to save this particular universe, and Barry says, because this is the one where my mom lives in, or whatever the line is. He even says, I'm not going to lose her again. All of this can really come to a head with the Reverse Flash pulling all the strings at the center of the story, maybe even releasing Zod from the Phantom Zone prison ship thingy, or he's orchestrated all of this to destroy the main DCEU, to take down the Justice League, and in the process, the multiverse. I mean, there are so many things the Reverse Flash is doing in the Flashpoint comic to make this nightmare happen for Barry. God, the possibilities are endless. Now, while I'm inclined to believe Reverse Flash is in this film in some capacity, I mean, there's also been a lot of rumors hinting at the fact that Rudy Mancuso is playing Reverse Flash. I mean, this is nothing new. We've all speculated he's going to be in the film in some way, shape, or form. That being said, I also have a strong feeling, and some leaked product photos also point to this, that a dark Barry or evil Barry, think Nega Scott from Scott Pilgrim, could be the villain at the center of the story. This is very intriguing to me because it implies that Barry himself and his selfish decision-making to change the past is his own worst enemy. That's super fucked up, but thematically, it makes sense. Barry selfishly trying to save something he can't, tightening his grip to have control over the situation, and inadvertently killing his mother. That feels very Andy Muschietti. It's dark and twisted and could really give the movie some pathos. God, the more I talk about it, I'm so excited. This thing fucking whips, man. Look, at the end of the day, if you only get one shot at a Flash movie, make it count. Make it Flashpoint and make it the most spectacular thing people have ever seen, and really get them excited about the complexities of him as a character and his powers. There's no better way to show him off than in the film that unpacks him and his abilities. Based on this amazing trailer, The Flash has a confidence DC hasn't had since The Suicide Squad, which granted, wasn't that long ago, but still, it is massive confidence. And when they come to play, they break the genre. And honestly, they've earned it. This whole team, excluding one person, should be fucking celebrated. The hard work they have put in, the years of production hell this has gone through, it is a miracle we are finally getting to watch this movie in June. Man, I'm so excited because DC's about to dominate. Flash is coming out of nowhere to be Quantumania and the multiverse shenanigans in the MCU at their own game. And look, I'm not trying to pit both brands against each other, but it is just interesting to me the difference in quality, at least in my opinion. And look, it may be setting up an entire new universe, but more than that, The Flash is our final love letter. A love letter to all of us who have stuck it out with the DCEU through all of its Suicide Squad 2016s and James Gunn's The Suicide Squads. A way to celebrate it all in one last film filled to the brim with people who cared about every frame. People who wanted to honor, as Patrick H. Willems once said, our true himbo auteur in Zack Snyder and the passion he put into crafting this universe. I couldn't think of a more loving way to pass the torch into this new universe, and I can't wait to race to the theater to see this victory lap of the DCEU.